Hello, and welcome to the DCNR Grants Workshop breakout session for the Rivers and Watershed Conservation Grant Programs. Thank you for your interest. My name is Mary Hunt, Rivers Project Manager in DCNR's Bureau of Recreation and Conservation, and I'm joined by my colleague Vali Edenbow, who is the Bureau's Rivers Specialist. This session will provide application guidance for rivers conservation planning and development grants, as well as community and watershed forestry, or CWF grant opportunities. The CWF grants include lawn conversion, riparian forest buffers, and community and urban forestry, also known as Tree Vitalize. We'll begin with a brief program overview, then dig into application guidance, and wrap up with a question and answer period. Here in DCNR's Rivers and Watershed Conservation Program, we advocate for Pennsylvania's waterways by offering grant funding and a series of initiatives to protect and enhance the conservation and recreational value of these waterways. We refer to it as the Rivers Program for short, yet it supports initiatives that benefit rivers, streams, creeks, lakes, wetlands, and other significant watershed resources. DCNR's Rivers Program consists of scenic rivers, water trails, River of the Year, paddling sojourns, and grants. Today, we are focusing on grants. Please reach out to us via email if you have any questions about the other program areas. Our grant program priorities include projects that enhance public access to Pennsylvania's waterways, or projects that improve Pennsylvania's waterways and watersheds. Eligible projects include those that implement Rivers Conservation Plan recommendations, enhance water trails, expand public access to aquatic resources, or increase awareness of Pennsylvania's river systems. The Rivers Conservation Grant Program is open to nonprofit and municipal entities. However, nonprofit organizations are encouraged to partner with a municipal entity to develop and execute this type of project, because some of our funding opportunities are only available to municipal entities. If you need assistance identifying or developing these partnerships, please contact your regional advisor. We have 3 grant application opportunities: community recreation and conservation planning, park rehabilitation and development, and community and watershed forestry. The planning grant offers funding for rivers and watershed conservation plans and master site development plans. Park rehabilitation and development grants offer funding for waterfront parks and walkways, boating and fishing access, and stream restoration. And community and watershed forestry grants offer funding for lawn conversion, riparian forest buffers, and urban and community forestry, also known as Tree Vitalize projects. Please note that private businesses are not eligible to apply for these grants. This funding stream can support nonprofits and municipal entities only. To apply for a Rivers grant, you'll go to the DCNR Grants Customer Service portal and select Community Conservation Partnership Program. Then you'll select Recreation and Conservation Planning or Park Rehabilitation and Development. Once you begin the application, please select the checkbox to indicate that the project is related to rivers if the primary purpose of your project is to provide river access or is watershed restoration. The next several slides will address planning and development grant opportunities, since those applications have many of the same questions. We will address community and watershed forestry separately thereafter. Starting with planning or development project types, these are typically conservation or recreation focused, or a combination of both. Recreation planning projects include waterway access or master site development plans for publicly accessible lands adjacent to waterways. On-the-ground development access projects include boat launches, fishing access, boardwalks, and areas for wildlife viewing. Conservation planning projects include rivers conservation or watershed restoration plans. In the field, conservation projects include stream or wetland restoration, small dam removal, riparian buffer plantings, and urban and community forestry, or tree vitalized plantings. Applications that address both conservation and recreation on Pennsylvania's waterways will be the most competitive. Park rehabilitation and development project examples include waterside parks, water access parks, waterway restoration, including the riparian areas, small dam and impediment removals, and creation of fish habitat and passages. Community recreation and conservation planning project examples include rivers and watershed conservation plans, rivers conservation plan updates, waterside park master site plans, watershed restoration plans, and waterway access plans. Your DCNR regional advisor can provide a sample scope of work that can be adapted to the scale and priorities of your planning project. Public input and strategy for implementation must be addressed throughout the planning process. For rivers development projects ready-to-go requirements, the first thing you'll want to do is contact your DCNR regional advisor to discuss your project. They will help you identify if your development project qualifies for a rivers grant if you are unsure. You'll also want to familiarize yourself with the ready-to-go requirements early on in the process. Following are the Rivers Development Project ready-to-go requirements that differ from other DCNR C2P2 grants. What is the site ownership or control status? For recreation amenities, the applicant should have ownership or an executed lease agreement with a minimum 25-year term. For field conservation projects, however, applicant ownership or a long-term landowner lease agreement or easement is ideal, but we also accept landowner agreements that secure access to the site solely for implementation of the waterway restoration. Is the site open to the public? All recreation development projects must be publicly accessible. Some conservation projects, such as small dam removals or waterway restorations, however, may not require public access. For site development drawings, you'll use the site development drawing checklist that is provided. It's important to cross-check your work and note all items in the drawing should coordinate to the project description or the scope of work and the budget. Be sure to present a clear picture of the proposed project. You'll need a realistic, accurate, and detailed budget, an essential component of which is having a recent cost estimate or having older estimates updated for optimal accuracy. Remember to please reference the ready-to-go checklist for the appropriate grant category, be it acquisition, planning, development, or partnerships, for the full menu of application requirements. The same thing goes for rivers and watershed planning projects. The first thing you'll want to do is contact your DCNR regional advisor. For planning project master site development plans, proof of ownership or control of the site through a minimum 25-year lease is required. And you'll need a P&DI receipt, which is the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory Environmental Review that looks for rare species or habitats within your project area. For river conservation plans, you'll need letters of support from 50% of the study area municipalities at the time of your application. You've heard about our Bureau of Recreation and Conservation Regional Advisors numerous times today. They are DCNR field representatives covering 6 regions across PA, and they are an essential part of your grant application process. They are here for you to talk through your project and application needs at a site visit and give you project resource recommendations for local contractors, consultants, and groups that have done similar project work to yours. They may have matching fund and project partner ideas as well. Another important project component can be permitting, depending on the work you are doing, of course. Please note that permitting can be challenging, take time, and has costs. A professional consultant or local conservation district can advise you on the permitting process so you can figure it into your grant project proposal. Matching funds are required for DCNR grants. Here's a quick list of funding sources that have been used as match for our Rivers Program grants. On the federal level, we have National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Environmental Protection Agency, and for the Chesapeake Bay watershed only, we have Chesapeake Wilds and Chesapeake Gateways. On the state level, there are DEP Growing Greener funds, Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission Fishing and Boat Access Grants, and there are also foundations that offer funding opportunities, including Foundations for PA Watersheds on a statewide scale, and Mellon, William Penn, and others on a regional scale. Next, I want to highlight some opportunities specific to the Rivers Program Conservation and Development Grants that support DCNR's Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, or SCORP, priorities. This addresses the SCORP question on the application. If you're creating a new waterway access, search for PA Outdoor Recreation Plan for the interactive map to see if your project is located in an access need area or is benefiting an underserved population. If you are creating a new waterway access and are in a high-need community, then you will receive more points on the application. Your project can also restore an existing access point, connect to a trail system, or restore an impaired waterway. It may advance climate resiliency by undertaking the following actions. Ask yourself if your project reduces flooding, improves floodplain or wetland connectivity, increases natural habitat, implements best management practices that allow for reduced maintenance, or provides green infrastructure like trees, plants, meadows, etc., not gray infrastructure like hardscaping. These tips will elevate your application above and beyond the baseline requirements, helping you to stand out above the crowd and garner more points. Waterway access projects must meet ADA requirements for parking, walkways, and restrooms. You can go above and beyond by providing specialized ADA equipment like an Easy Dock, addressing mental sensory disabilities in your design, and including multilingual signage. Stream restoration and small dam removal projects do not require ongoing public ADA access. A landowner agreement giving access over their property to the project site is not required when you apply, but you can go above and beyond by including the agreement or agreements with your application. If you're only able to provide limited public access or no public access to the site, simply explain the benefits of the limited access for your stream restoration and habitat conservation project. Remember, you don't have to do all these things, but if you plan to do any of them, don't forget to tell us about it. These tips comprise the foundation of a solid grant application. When responding to the planning question, don't select multiple plans thinking the more the better. Do cite 2 to 3 plans that are most directly related and relevant to what you are doing. River or watershed conservation plans and greenway trail or access plans are the stronger plan references in this case. When putting together your budget, it is important that you remember to detail the total project cost, which is the grant request plus the match, and be sure that budget items match what is in your narrative and your site development drawing. Also, be sure to estimate realistic hourly cost for your planning project. You must plan for professional services in an amount of no greater than 20% of your eligible construction costs for development grants. Please note, if you have matching funds to pay for any overage above 20% of eligible professional service fees, it may not be used as match as it is deemed an ineligible cost by DCNR. Only DCNR eligible fees may be used as match. Stated another way, if your professional services fees come in over 20%, another funding source must be found for the overage, and that amount cannot be used as match to DCNR funds. Remember that administrative costs must be no higher than 5% of the DCNR grant amount, not the total project cost, but the DCNR grant amount for your Community Watershed Forestry grant. For development projects, the site development drawings must clearly identify project phases if pertinent to your project. If you do have phases, it would be best to have the same design consultant or engineer and construction contractor on all phases of the project. The project drawings need to match the application narrative and detailed budget, and include ADA features for recreation projects. The site engineers or architects who develop the drawings must know the ADA guidance and comply and incorporate the features in the site development drawings, showing the ADA details and areas clearly in the plans. They will also need to make the ADA compliance determination, assuring that the project is indeed in compliance. Now we'll shift gears and discuss the Community and Watershed Forestry grant opportunity. Community and Watershed Forestry, or CWF projects, improve local water quality and wildlife habitat, and increase community resiliency by installing sustainable forest practices on both public and private property. You'll apply on the DCNR Grants website by selecting Community and Watershed Forestry. The CWF grant program provides financial assistance to identify locations in need of riparian forest buffers, lawn conversion, and urban and community forestry, and to design, implement, and establish these practices. DCNR's definition of community watershed forestry project types is as follows. Riparian forest buffers are trees, shrubs, and other plants that grow next to waterways that help protect water quality. Lawn conversion is the conversion of presently maintained lawn to actively managed upland forest or perennial native meadow. And urban and community forestry, also known as Tree Vitalize, is a program that builds capacity within communities to plan for, plant, and care for trees on publicly accessible lands only. Fact sheets on each project type are available and include descriptions, funding priorities, eligible activities, and contact information. Go to the DCNR Grants Customer Service Portal and select C2P2 program for the Community Conservation Partnership Program, then select CWF Grants. Our web team strives to make access easy and navigating the portal intuitive. These documents, along with everything else you need, can be found there. Now we'll talk about some of the CWF grant program details. Eligible grant activities include targeted landowner outreach, project design, materials, labor executed by hired or grantee staff, site prep, post-planting establishment, tree tender training, and short-term stewardship and training. I'm going to take a moment to talk about post-planting establishment. The legislation behind DCNR funding does not permit maintenance as an eligible activity. Post-planting establishment, however, is permitted for a period of 5 years from the Community and Watershed Forestry practice installation date. These practices include riparian buffers and lawn conversions. Establishment tasks may include mowing, managing tree protection, controlling invasive species, and similar activities needed to ensure that the practice thrives. Grantees can use up to 20% of the DCNR grant amount for post-planting establishment of buffers or conversions for their current grant application or for projects that were planted prior to the grant period, including those done with outside funding sources. Remember, the establishment period is 5 years immediately after planting, so DCNR funds and match can only be used within that time period. Eligible planting locations include public or private properties in Pennsylvania. Private properties require a landowner agreement of 25-year term minimum for buffer plantings and lawn conversions. You may bundle multiple planting sites into one application, and you can apply to implement more than one practice with a single application. CWF funding details include a $50,000 minimum for a CWF grant request. If your project is less than that amount, there are options. The PA Association of Conservation Districts works with county conservation districts on project funding. Contact your local district for more info. You can also seek support from your local DCNR Service Forester or Watershed Forestry team. Their information is also included in the grant portal online. The maximum grant amount from DCNR is 80% with a 20% minimum match, cash or non-cash, based on the total project cost. Say DCNR funds $50,000 for a project, then there would be a minimum match of $12,500 for a total project cost of $62,500. It's also important to note that administrative costs are limited to 5% of the DCNR grant amount. So in this scenario, a $50,000 grant amount from DCNR would mean a $2,500 cap for administrative costs. The Community and Watershed Forestry grant application has a different set of questions than the Rivers Conservation Planning and Development applications. So we're going to go over the questions that you're going to be asked and tips on how to answer. For project scope, the directive is to provide an overview of your project activities, including objectives, proposed schedule, measurable outcomes, and any unique and environmental or conservation benefits that this project will provide. The best application scores addressed items such as unique benefits, creative, innovative concepts, buffer widths of at least 50 feet and lawn conversions of at least 1 acre, and robust stewardship plans for urban and community forestry projects or tree vitalize. The qualifications directive. Describe your organization's past experience completing similar projects and current capacity to manage the proposed project. Outline the related expertise of key staff who will be engaged in this project. If you plan to involve other partners, please list those partners and their related role and expertise. If you plan to use volunteers, please describe their role and any training that you will provide. The best application scores show strong related experience, capacity to manage both the project in the field as well as in the portal, and the ability to define clear partner and volunteer roles. The outreach directive is to explain how you will plan to identify and engage local partners, landowners, and other key stakeholders. This is for targeted landowner outreach. DCNR does not fund general education, and the strongest applications present an innovative approach to landowner outreach and engagement and commitments from landowners and partners. They also define clear roles and responsibilities for the proposed tasks. For project methodology, the directive is to explain how you will complete the scope of work, provide clear and concise details of all the activities and resources required. Detail the roles of the applicant, landowner, and other partners or stakeholders in completing the scope of work. Be sure to provide detailed activities and present a strategic, logical, and realistic methodology. The project establishment and stewardship component of the grant application asks you to detail your strategy for post-planting establishment of the community and watershed forestry practices. Include how, when, and by whom the activities will be accomplished for the first 5 years after planting. Explain how you will steward the planting over the long term. Describe what your organization, the local community, or other stakeholders are doing to build capacity and expertise for long-term stewardship. If your proposal includes stewardship activities on plantings funded by other sources or previous grants, describe those activities as well. Higher scoring applications include strong related experience, a detailed and realistic plan for post-planting establishment, defined roles and responsibilities, a detailed and realistic plan for long-term stewardship, and show organizational and community capacity to support that long-term stewardship. For your project budget, the strongest project budgets propose detailed and reasonable costs, minimal planting accessory costs, for example, fencing, and administration and management costs of 5% or less of the DCNR grant request. DCNR is looking for a high level of return on investment, and high-scoring grants show cost per tree for establishment and stewardship, and cost per acre for post-planting establishment and stewardship. Remember, staff time on project activities directly related to the scope of work is eligible under the CWF grant opportunity and needs to be itemized. Staff time should be reported as billable rates or the employee's hourly wage plus benefits. Eligible project activities for staff time include landowner outreach, volunteer engagement, and labor. Again, admin fees must be no greater than 5%. And finally, the strongest applications have committed secure match at the time of application. Some of the approaches that our successful grantees have taken include partnering with multiple landowners, planting on lands that they own, and planting on their community's parks or preserves. DCNR also looks favorably on grantees applying to conduct CWF mini grants and subawards. These organizations come in for a lump sum of funding and then provide their own mini grant or subaward program. We want to emphasize that for the CWF grants, staff time for scope of work tasks, including writing planting plans, talking to landowners, enrolling the landowners, and getting the plants in the ground, are covered by this program. This is to assist the capacity of our partner organizations to do their important work. Innovation is also encouraged. For example, Stroud Water Research Center is exploring partnerships to reach more farmers and examine the profitability of multifunctional buffers. Remember, you can get consultations on your projects before you apply. Local conservation districts, the DCNR service foresters, and watershed forestry technicians can provide technical assistance to help strengthen your grant application. There is a new federal funding opportunity for urban and community forestry or tree vitalized projects. DCNR hopes to receive funding from the U.S. Forest Service that will be available to CWF urban and community forestry project grant applicants in Pennsylvania within disadvantaged communities. This grant opportunity differs from the CWF grants in 3 ways. 1, the projects must take place in disadvantaged communities. 2, funding will be dispersed on a reimbursement basis, and grantees will need to invoice DCNR and provide documentation of incurred costs to receive payments. And 3, matching funds are not required. You'll want to speak with Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager Ned Brockmeyer. His contact information is on one of your handouts, and his phone number is 717-772-8928. That's 717-772-8928. DCNR regional advisors are available to assist you with your grant application, and service foresters and watershed forestry technicians can provide technical assistance for your project. Links to these sources are readily available in the grants portal. Thank you for attending the Rivers and Watershed Conservation Grant Program breakout session. We hope you had an opportunity to review the handouts, including the FAQs that were previously emailed, and that they were helpful. Our contact information is on the slide. After reviewing the handouts and the grant customer service portal, please feel free to reach out with any questions. And for project-specific questions, contact your regional advisor. We are here to help. Hope you have a great rest of your day.